Multipass. The Fifth Element was not just a sci-fi movie, it was a production so ambitious and chaotic that Hollywood said no for 5 years straight. Hidden in every frame were secrets most viewers never caught, like the fact that a teenage director's dream turned real, or that a love triangle destroyed a marriage on set, or that one of the lead actress's wigs was so toxic it fell out in clumps. These are 20 strange secrets you missed in The Fifth Element, and the truth gets even stranger when you realize this was the most expensive European film ever made at the time. Number 1. Luc Besson first imagined this story when he was 16 years old, except it was not a film at all, it was a novel. A bored high school kid in France started writing about flying taxis and orange-haired aliens just to escape his mundane teenage life, and he kept refining the story for over 20 years, while carrying notebooks full of world-building details from his teens all the way into his 30s. By the time cameras actually rolled in 1996, Besson was 38 and finally bringing his teenage fantasy to life. The core concept that love is the ultimate element needed to save humanity came from the weirdest place. Besson was helping his 13-year-old sister with philosophy homework about Plato, and in Plato's classical elements of earth, water, air, and fire, there was a fifth element that stood above the rest, which was spirit, or the life force. Besson had his light bulb moment right there at the kitchen table, and later joked that he basically stole from a 2,300-year-old philosopher to finish a story he started as a kid. Number 2. The original screenplay was 400 pages long, which in Hollywood terms equals nearly 7 hours of film. Besson had basically written enough material for a trilogy, maybe more, and his co-writer Robert Mark Kamen said Besson showed up with 180 pages and then added another 180 pages that made absolutely no sense on its own. They briefly talked about using the extra material as a sequel, but the second part never clicked as a standalone story. Instead, they spent months compressing everything into one jam-packed movie because Gaumont, the French studio, wanted something actually manageable. They carved out storylines, cut entire character arcs, deleted whole planets. Even after brutal editing, the final film feels dense with unexplained lore and visual details. And that is because you are literally watching the tip of an iceberg where beneath the surface lived hundreds of pages of world building that never made it to screen. Number 3. The Fifth Element almost happened 5 years earlier with completely different stars. And we are talking Mel Gibson as Corbin Dallas. Back in 1992, Besson tried launching the film as a major production right after his success with La Femme Nikita, and Mel Gibson was approached to play the lead while Julia Roberts was being considered for Lilu. Prince was the first choice for Ruby Road. Jean-Paul Gaultier had already designed costumes, and the budget sat around $100 million, which was absolutely insane money for a European production at the time. But no studio would finance such a weird sci-fi film without guaranteed stars, especially not at that price tag. So in December 1992, the entire production halted and the team disbanded. Concept art got shelved, and it would take a few more years, plus a completely new strategy and a very different cast to resurrect Besson's space opera. Number 4. Bruce Willis basically saved the entire production, which is wild because he had met with Besson about the role way back in 1991 and showed interest. But his recent box office flops like Hudson Hawk and Billy Bathgate made him cautious about jumping into another risky project. So when the 1992 attempt collapsed, Willis moved on to other films. Fast forward to 1994 when Besson's Leon the Professional became a hit and Columbia Pictures agreed to back The Fifth Element, except they wanted a tighter budget. Besson was actually planning to cast a cheaper, unknown actor as the lead when fate stepped in, because Besson happened to have lunch with Demi Moore, who was Willis's wife at the time, and he mentioned the project was finally greenlit. Willis remembered that wild script from years ago and told Besson they could work out a deal, and after reading the revised version, Willis signed on, reportedly just 2 hours later. His star power made the financing possible, and international distributors jumped in, which is why Besson later said publicly that without Bruce Willis, The Fifth Element would have stayed a dream in a drawer. Number 5. Finding Lilu nearly broke Besson because he auditioned somewhere between 200 and 300 actresses across Paris, London, and Rome. Elizabeth Berkley tried out, Tricia Helfer auditioned. But Besson needed someone with this otherworldly quality where strength mixed with innocence and a face that did not look fully human. He found that in 19-year-old Milla Jovovich, who was a model that spoke multiple languages and had this ethereal presence on camera that just worked. Jovovich could shift from vulnerable to deadly in seconds, so Besson cast her as his supreme being. Now, here is where things got messy. At the time, Besson was married to actress Maïwenn Lebesco, who actually played the blue alien Diva in the film, and during production, Besson and Milla fell in love. He left his wife for his lead actress when Maïwenn was only 21 and pregnant with Besson's child, and when the affair became public, it turned into this whole scandal. Besson and Jovovich got married in late 1997, right after the film premiered at Cannes. Then they divorced 2 years later. So the behind-the-scenes drama was almost as intense as what ended up on screen. Number 6. Lilu speaks a real constructed language, and Besson did not just have Milla make up gibberish on the spot. He invented about 400 words of vocabulary and basic grammar for what he called the divine language, and Milla Jovovich, who already spoke English, French, Russian, and Serbian, threw herself into learning this completely fictional tongue. She and Besson held entire conversations in the divine language during breaks on set, and they even wrote letters to each other using the alien alphabet. By the end of filming, Jovovich had expanded the language to roughly 1,000 words through their constant practice. So when Lilu says Apipulai after defeating the Mangalores, that actually translates to something like a triumphant I did it or booyah. The phrase Lilu Minai, Lakataraba Lamanai, Chai, Ekbat de Sebat was crafted to sound lyrical and unpronounceable, like a song in an ancient alien dialect. And this level of linguistic detail is completely invisible to most viewers, but it gave Jovovich something concrete to work with and made Lilu feel genuinely alien. Number 7. Milla's iconic orange hair absolutely destroyed her scalp because Besson wanted a hair color that had never been seen before, inspired by the neon orange worn by roadside construction workers. The hair team bleached Milla's naturally brown hair and then dyed it this blazing tangerine with pale roots. And it looked incredible on camera, practically glowing. But Milla's hair grew fast, so within days her dark roots showed through and the stylist kept touching it up with more bleach and dye, overlapping chemicals on top of chemicals until Milla's hair started falling out in clumps. She later revealed her scalp became so damaged they had to wig me halfway through shooting, so if you watch closely, Lilu's hair around the Flossed in Paradise scenes is actually a very expensive wig. They timed the switch with her shower and makeover scene, so the slightly fuller, healthier-looking hair could be explained as post-shampoo styling, and off-camera, Milla spent months nursing her fried hair back to health. The lesson here is if you ever want to cosplay Lilu, just buy an orange wig and save yourself the chemical nightmare. Number 8. Jean-Paul Gaultier created over 1,000 costumes, and the legendary French fashion designer was given total creative freedom to dress the entire universe of The Fifth Element. He designed everything from Lilu's thermal bandage straps, to Ruby Rod's leopard print bodysuits, to Zorg's plastic chest plate and that bizarre tie, and he also personally created looks for every single background extra. For one massive crowd scene at Flossed in Paradise with 300 extras, Gaultier checked each costume as people lined up, adjusting accessories and making sure no two looked identical, treating the film like a 23rd century fashion show. He was reworking ideas from his past runway collections into sci-fi couture, and Gaultier later said he designed about 10 seasons worth of fashion for one movie. His work influenced real-world fashion for years afterward, where pop stars and designers referenced his Fifth Element costumes in their own collections. And Gaultier even made a cameo in the airport scene dressed impeccably while checking Corbin's boarding pass. Number 9. The Diva's opera was designed to be physically impossible for humans to sing, and composer Eric Serra, along with opera singer Inva Mula, created the show-stopping Diva dance sequence where Serra deliberately wrote note transitions that no human vocal cords could achieve in real time. The rapid leaps in pitch and machine gun speed of high notes exceeded natural breath control, so Inva Mula sang the difficult phrases note by note in separate takes, and sound engineers digitally stitched the pieces together while tweaking the pitch as needed. The result is this captivating, unearthly melody that sounds like an alien voice, and only decades later have trained singers managed to perform versions of Diva dance live, though even then they cheat on the hardest runs. The character of Diva Plava Laguna on screen is French actress Maïwenn, who was Besson's wife at the time, in hours of blue prosthetic makeup. But every note came from Inva Mula's voice recorded in a studio and layered over the footage. A real mishap almost destroyed this scene forever, because after filming, the original negatives were accidentally dropped on an airport tarmac and run over by a forklift, and the associate producer delivering the reels nearly had a heart attack, though somehow they managed to save and restore the footage. Number 10. Gary Oldman played Zorg as a favor and ended up hating every second of it. Oldman did not audition or seek out the role at all. Luc Besson just called him and said, "I need you to do a movie," and Oldman agreed without even reading the script, because Besson had helped finance Oldman's directorial debut, Nil by Mouth. Oldman later admitted in interviews that The Fifth Element is not my favorite and told Playboy magazine, "Oh no, I cannot bear it," saying that watching himself in the film triggers memories of the uncomfortable plastic costumes and that goofy hairpiece he had to wear. But Oldman dove into the absurdity anyway, and based Zorg's peculiar accent and mannerisms on two completely different personalities, which were Looney Tunes character, Bugs Bunny, and Texas billionaire politician Ross Perot. The slicked hair and huge grin came from Bugs Bunny's mischief, while the twangy southern drawl and business obsession came straight from 1990s presidential candidate Perot. And Besson had vaguely described Zorg to Oldman as a dandy, nouveau, riche Hitler figure, which Oldman took and somehow turned into one of sci-fi's most eccentric villains. Here is a strange detail though. Bruce Willis and Gary Oldman never share a scene in the entire movie. Corbin Dallas and Zorg never meet face-to-face, and their characters' storylines crisscross, but they do not even realize the other exists. The closest they come is at the Floston Paradise Hotel, where Corbin rushes into an elevator with Lilu just moments before Zorg steps out of another elevator nearby, and this was Besson deliberately subverting the typical hero versus villain showdown. Number 11. The film's visual style came straight from French comic books, and Besson hired two of France's most celebrated comic illustrators, Jean Mobius Giraud and Jean-Claude Mézières, as concept designers. Mobius, who was famous for his work in Metal Hurlant magazine and graphic novels like The Incal, helped dream up cityscapes and alien designs, while Mézières, the co-creator of the Valerian sci-fi comics, contributed imagery that felt like comic panels brought to life. Years earlier, Mézières had drawn a scene of a taxi driver flying through a futuristic city, and Besson loved that image so much he incorporated a nearly identical sequence with Corbin's flying cab. After the film released, though, Alejandro Jodorowsky, who wrote The Incal, and Moebius sued Besson for plagiarism, claiming The Fifth Element lifted elements like a mystical woman who falls from the sky and an urban sci-fi aesthetic directly from their comic. The case dragged on until 2004 when it was finally dismissed because the court found only tiny fragments of the comic were used, and more importantly, Mobius had been hired to legitimately contribute his art to the film, so the overlap was authorized collaboration rather than theft. Despite the legal mess, Besson always openly acknowledged his comic inspirations, and decades later, he directed Valerian and the City of 1,000 Planets based on Mézières' work, which brought everything full circle. Number 12. The Fifth Element shattered European film records because with a budget around $90 million, it was the most expensive film ever produced outside Hollywood at that point. No European-financed movie had spent that kind of money before, and Gaumont, the French studio, took a massive gamble that paid off spectacularly when the film earned over $263 million worldwide and became a global hit. It especially resonated in Europe, Asia, and South America, and in France, it sold over 7.7 million tickets and remained the highest-grossing French film worldwide until 2011. American audiences were way more divided, though, where the movie grossed only about $75 million in the US and received mixed reviews from critics who did not know what to make of its eccentric tone. Over time, though, home video and DVD sales turned The Fifth Element into a cult classic in America, and it won the Best Director César, which is France's version of the Oscar. Plus, it took home the BAFTA award for visual effects. It was also nominated for a few Golden Raspberry Awards, with some critics finding Chris Tucker and Milla Jovovich's performances too over the top. But Besson was not bothered because he understood the film's campy humor was not for everyone. To celebrate its 20th anniversary in 2017, The Fifth Element returned to hundreds of theaters worldwide for special screenings, which proved the wild space opera still had legions of passionate fans. Number 13. The futuristic New York skyline was built with massive miniatures rather than just computers, and visual effects supervisor Mark Stetson, along with his team at Digital Domain, constructed about 25 skyscraper models, some up to 20 feet tall, at 1/24th scale. It took 80 model makers 5 months to build the detailed miniature city, which was complete with tiny windows, balconies, and even miniature furniture visible through glass. And motion control cameras filmed sweeping shots through the miniature streets. Then hundreds of CGI flying cars, those streams of yellow cabs and police cruisers, were layered into the footage while matte paintings extended the city to make it seem endless. The signature 5-minute hover car chase through Manhattan consisted of over 80 separate visual effects shots that combined practical models, 6th-scale model cars, CG vehicles, and debris, smoke, lighting effects, and compositing of dozens of elements per frame. At the time, this hybrid approach pushed the limits of mid-1990s technology, where Digital Domain had a crew of 170 artists and model makers working simultaneously, and Besson also insisted the future city be bright and in broad daylight, unlike the dark, rainy futures of films like Blade Runner. That meant the miniatures and CGI had nowhere to hide, because every detail was brightly lit and visible, which raised the bar for realism. The film won the 1998 BAFTA Award for visual effects by beating Hollywood productions with far bigger budgets, and today, some effects have aged, but many still hold up surprisingly well. The mix of tangible miniatures and careful CGI gives the world a richness that pure computer graphics often lack. Number 14. Prince almost played Ruby Rhod until a costume miscommunication ended the whole thing. The flamboyant interstellar DJ role was written with Prince in mind from the start, and Prince expressed interest and met with Besson plus costume designer Jean-Paul Gaultier. Gaultier designed this outrageous wardrobe that included mesh body stockings with strategically placed faux queues, which are fake butt attachments, plus extravagant hairpieces, and in what turned into a hilarious mishap, Gaultier excitedly described the costume to Prince in his thick French accent by saying, "If il have faux cul," while gesturing at his own rear. Prince's eyes went wide and he thought Gaultier was saying something completely different, so he signaled his bodyguard and they left immediately. Besson later explained Prince misheard faux cul as an insult, and on top of that, he found the outfit too effeminate for his taste. So, despite the amusing misunderstanding, Prince was intrigued, but his concert tour schedule ended up conflicting with shooting dates anyway. The role went to Chris Tucker, who made Ruby Road gloriously his own with rapid-fire line delivery and gender-bending costumes, though Gaultier's original designs stayed in the film with those leopard print bodysuits and all. Number 15. Corbin Dallas is a taxi driver because of Besson's father, which is actually pretty touching. Unlike typical sci-fi heroes, Corbin is not a super soldier or chosen one. He is just a regular guy who drives a cab and rises to the occasion when needed. Besson finds muscle-bound chosen hero characters boring and wanted someone relatable, But making Corbin a taxi driver was also a tribute to Besson's own father, who worked a second job as a taxi driver to support young Luc's filmmaking dreams. Taxi drivers appear throughout Besson's work from Subway to the Taxi series he produced, and they are basically unsung heroes in his cinematic universe. Bruce Willis described Corbin as an archetypal regular Joe, the kind of character audiences are supposed to like, and this personal touch set The Fifth Element apart by giving us a 23rd century savior who is more Brooklyn cabbie than some perfect space marine. Number 16. The film is absolutely packed with hidden Easter eggs that most people miss. Corbin's cigarette early on is shown to be 3/4 filter and only 1/4 tobacco, which is this visual gag about trying to quit smoking in the future. When President Lindbergh tells priest Vito Cornelius he has 20 seconds to state his case, Cornelius's rambling plea lasts exactly 20 seconds of screen time, which is a precise editing joke for anyone with a stopwatch. There is even this moment where Cornelius addresses Corbin as Mr. Willis, before Corbin corrects him by saying it is Dallas. And actor Ian Holm flubbed the line, but Besson kept it, figuring most viewers would not catch the meta reference to Bruce Willis. Lilu's full name, Lilu Manai Lekatariba Lamanai, Alai Chai Ekbat de Sabat, was crafted to sound lyrical and impossible for anyone to repeat. And when she says Apupulai, that is a real word in the divine language that means something like, I did it, or Booyah. These small details reward anyone who watches the film multiple times and show how much thought went into every frame. Number 17. The movie almost had a sequel, but Besson flat out refused to make one. Early drafts included storylines for 2 more films, and Besson had material for Corbin and Lilu to go on another cosmic adventure, possibly exploring the planet Floston itself. And rumors of a sequel titled Mr. Shadow swirled around for years. Besson ultimately stated he had no desire to make a sequel, though, because he felt the story was complete and that the film's cult status was best left untouched. Plus, the underperformance in the US box office made a sequel financially risky anyway. Instead, all that extra world building stayed locked in Besson's 400-page script drafts and just gets hinted at through the dense details and unexplained lore scattered throughout the final film. Number 18. The Fifth Element influenced a whole generation of sci-fi cinema that came after it. The film's vibrant aesthetic with its mix of action and comedy, plus those gender-bending costumes, left a mark on everything from Star Wars prequels to video games like Mass Effect, and elements of its visual style kept popping up everywhere. Fashion designers from Alexander McQueen to Balmain referenced Gaudier's costumes in their runway shows, while pop stars paid homage, with Lady Gaga once wearing a Lilu-inspired bandage outfit on stage. The Diva dance became this iconic piece of music that got covered in talent shows and concerts all over the world, and cosplayers still flood conventions dressed as Lilu or Ruby Road decades later. The film's optimistic, colorful vision of the future stood in total contrast to the grim dystopias that were dominating 1990s sci-fi, offering this cheerfully crazy alternative that resonated with audiences who were hungry for something fun. Number 19. The production faced constant near disasters throughout filming, because making a massive sci-fi epic in the mid-1990s meant dealing with cutting-edge but unstable technology. The motion control cameras used for miniature work were super temperamental, CGI software crashed all the time, and the enormous sets, including the Floston Paradise Hotel, required precise coordination between practical effects and digital compositing. One mishap involved the Diva scene negatives getting dropped and run over at an airport, while another challenge was coordinating hundreds of extras in elaborate costumes without any modern digital crowd replication tools, which meant every crowd scene required physically dressing and directing real people. The indoor explosion that destroys part of the Floston set was one of the largest controlled blasts ever filmed on a soundstage at the time, and required incredibly careful safety planning. But despite all these obstacles, the crew pulled off a visual spectacle that pushed 1990s filmmaking to its absolute limits. Number 20. The Fifth Element really is love, And this is not some vague interpretation. At the film's climax, the four elemental stones need Lilu, who is the supreme being, to activate them and create divine light to stop evil. But Lilu despairs at humanity's violence and war. Only when Corbin confesses his love does she find the strength to release the power. And Besson explicitly intended the fifth element to represent human love and compassion as the force that binds the classical elements together and makes life worth saving. This is not abstract either, because Lilu embodies it, where her full name translates loosely to Precious Stone of the Earth. The film's climax, where love literally defeats cosmic evil, might seem corny to some people, but Besson was completely unapologetic about it because he wanted viewers to actually grapple with Lilu's question about what is the use of saving life when you see what you do with it, and then feel the answer in Corbin's kiss. In a movie absolutely full of explosions and absurdity, that sincere emotional beat is what elevates everything and leaves audiences not just entertained, but genuinely moved. Bonus secret: multipass became this massive cultural phenomenon, where that single word delivered by Milla Jovovich with wide-eyed innocence turned into one of the most quoted lines from 1990s cinema. It spawned memes and t-shirts and inside jokes that persist decades later. Fans shout multipass at conventions, and the thermal bandage costume with orange hair became these instantly recognizable Halloween staples. The film's legacy lives way beyond box office numbers or what critics said, because it created a shared language and visual iconography for an entire generation of sci-fi fans. The fifth element was too weird, too big, way too risky. Studios said no, and critics were divided. American audiences mostly shrugged. But the film found its people and became a cult classic that refuses to fade away. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you'd like to see more of our videos.